Have you ever stood at a family dinner and felt, with unsettling certainty, that the people laughing beside you grew up in a parallel universe? Same street, same roof, yet somehow another planet. You pass the salt to your brother, and in the silence between your hands you realize his memories of the house. Its rules, its warmth, its storms, bear only casual resemblance to yours. If that recognition stings, take a breath. You're not malfunctioning. You're witnessing a law of psychological physics that few families name out loud. No two siblings are raised by the same parents. From this point forward, I'll speak directly to you because the biology and stories we're about to explore don't land fully unless they ricochet off your own childhood walls. Keep one photo from your first decade in mind, maybe a birthday cake or a scraped knee triumph. That image will be your personal anchor while we sail through science, philosophy, and one extraordinary true story. First, the tension. You and your siblings share DNA, address, maybe even freckles, but research says your inner maps of mom and dad diverge as sharply as mountain paths after the first fork. In 2019, the University of Sheffield compiled longitudinal data from 22,000 families and found sibling agreement on parental warmth dropped to statistical noise by age 15. Meanwhile, cortisol profiles, a gold standard stress biomarker, varied up to 50% between firstborns and thirdborns in the same household. Psychologists call this birth order effect. Sociologists prefer family niche theory. Geneticists point to epigenetic drift. I'll use a simpler leitmotif, lens, because that single word captures our theme. Experience never arrives unfiltered, and each child's lens refracts family light into a private spectrum. Imagine your parents as rivers. When your older sister arrived, the water coursed fast, maybe wild. By the time you floated in, drought or dam or wisdom slowed the current. Same river, new lens. Alfred Adler, the Viennese thinker who first tied personality to sibling rank, argued that children aren't copy-pasting traits from parents. They're strategists carving personal water routes through a moving delta. The eldest becomes a surrogate captain, the middle a resourceful ferry, the youngest a swift sailboat trading control for agility. Adler wrote, "Every child is born into a different situation," a sentence that sounds obvious until you realize he meant even when the address hasn't changed. The pressure builds because adulthood expects tidy origin stories. Resumes, dating bios, even therapist intake forms ask for a single thumbnail of childhood. You compress 10,000 dinners, victories, scoldings into one phrase. Pretty normal. Yet each compression feels slightly false, like describing a symphony by the length of its sheet music. Your private lens, how dad's silence shaped your ambition, how mom's laughter cushioned your failures, never quite overlaps with the one your sibling swears is definitive. You worry one of you misremembers. The truth, both recollections are accurate through their own optics. Let's pause the data and breathe life into the theory through a real, living story. In a quiet Boston suburb, two sisters, Emily and Sarah Nagoski, grew up under the same middle-class roof, 1 year apart. Their parents valued academics, church, and small-town modesty. Yet Emily emerged a sex science researcher who now tours the world, teaching women about orgasm. Sarah became a choral conductor who helps communities find collective resonance. In their joint memoir, Burnout, they reveal that the same year their father lost his job, Emily, the elder, internalized a script of achieve to rescue the family, while Sarah registered entertain to soothe the storm. Two opposite lenses forged by one event. Decades later, Emily's data-driven courage and Sarah's musical empathy merged when they co-wrote a bestseller about completing the body's stress cycle, the very loop that once split their childhood interpretations. Their tale proves lens divergence isn't tragedy. It can become complementary brilliance. Return to your kitchen table memory. Maybe your brother was labeled the rebel, you the responsible one. Neuroscientist Jay Gied's MRI-based work shows gray matter maturation peaks years earlier for firstborns, tilting early teacher praise toward them and nudging later siblings to sculpt separate niches: athletics, comedy, mischief. Parents often swear they treat children equally, but equal input filters through unequal birth order timing. A father's disciplinary strictness may soften between 1995 and 2005. Marriage satisfaction may wax or wane, economies crash and rise. To each child, those temporal shifts feel like fundamental personality differences in the same adult. They're not illusions, they're time-stamped truths. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. This is our first wave of relief. If your sister accuses dad of hovering and you recall an absentee workaholic, you're both right. Lens discrepancy explains why family reunions can feel like heated debates over a movie seen from different rows. You can put down the courtroom exhibits. There's no single authoritative cut, yet knowledge alone doesn't dissolve resentment. You may still ache that your younger sibling abandoned curfews you obeyed, or envy the patience your parents reserve for the youngest. Jung warned that suppressed frustration returns disguised as fate. Translation: if you don't process lens-based jealousy, adulthood replays it as workplace rivalry or partner distrust. Here, the narrative dips. Tension climbs. You realize old family scripts can stalk you longer than any ex. Breath tightens. Then a pivot. Understanding lens theory grants practical leverage. The University of Texas conducted a 2021 experiment using birth order reframing during sibling meditations. Participants verbalized one childhood scene and then re-described it from their sibling's assumed lens. Heart rate variability, a resilience marker, increased 12% after 3 sessions, and reported grudges shrank by a third. Perspective taking literally rewires autonomic balance. Let this resonate. Your lens is real but not fixed. You can borrow others and widen your optic nerve. Watt said, "The menu is not the meal," urging us to taste experience rather than worship categories. When you realize your brother's sarcasm was his survival language in a house that pinned golden child medals on you, empathy displaces moral arithmetic. You see possibility, sibling tension as two musicians finally hearing each other's isolated tracks and deciding to jam rather than judge. Cue second cycle of tension. Science unveils that lens divergence extends into gene expression. A 2020 Columbia epigenetics study found methylation patterns, chemical toggles on DNA, varied dramatically between siblings who lived through different parental stress phases. One child born before a bankruptcy carried heightened inflammatory markers. A younger sibling's genome remained calmer. Biology itself confirms, whom your parents are shifts cell by cell over time. Recognizing this can rekindle grief. Why did I inherit the anxious version of mom, my sister the serene one? Yet the revelation carries empowerment. You're not cursed, you're patterned, and patterns can be repatterned. We step back to deliver a didactic spark. Personal growth begins when you stop viewing family roles as verdicts and start seeing them as chapters. You can't erase firstborn hyper-responsibility or youngest child charm, but you can assign them adult contexts that fit. Hyper-responsibility becomes project leadership rather than emotional parentification. Charm converts to networking without people-pleasing. The leitmotif lens returns. Refine the glass, don't smash it. Now for a third arc of tension and release. Holiday gatherings often resurrect childhood optics in seconds. You regress from confident professional to defensive 12-year-old before the mashed potatoes arrive. Prepare by naming your current lens aloud. I notice I'm wearing the peacemaker glasses. Speak it quietly to your partner or into a phone note. Research in affect labeling, Matthew Lieberman, UCLA, shows that identifying an emotional frame reduces amygdala firing. The brain calms because the observer self steps onto the stage. Let's seal insights with one more real-world micro-story. In 2011, two Kenyan brothers, separated by 8 years, co-founded a mobile money startup. David, the elder, negotiated deals with banks. Paul, forever the diplomatic youngest, built village-level trust. Investors praised their complementary grit until sibling disagreements about risk nearly imploded the company. They hired a coach who introduced lens swaps. Each brother spent 3 meetings arguing as the other, using I statements. David practiced Paul's patience. Paul mimicked David's bold speed. Tension deflated. By 2018, their app processed $1 billion in microloans. Their success wasn't despite lens diversity, it was because they harnessed it consciously. But before we leap to classrooms and policy, let's widen the aperture even further. Because family lenses don't stop at the front door, they tint whole civilizations. Picture 2 siblings raised under the same national flag, yet divided by heritage language. In bilingual homes, researchers at the University of Toronto discovered that children who defaulted to the minority tongue often scored higher on theory of mind tests than their monolingual brothers or sisters. The reason? Each code switch rewires social context, forcing fresh perspective. In other words, cultural lens layering can sharpen empathy, just as birth order carves niches. Now add adoption. Minnesota's landmark Sibling Interaction and Behavior Study tracked 409 families where one child was adopted at birth. Genetic dissimilarity, you'd expect, would widen experiential gaps. Yet the surprise, adoptive kids' sense of parental fairness, correlated more with the parent's stress level at the time of their arrival than with DNA distance. A mother grieving her own parent when she adopted projected guarded warmth. Her older biological son, welcomed during a career upswing, recalled exuberant bedtime stories. Same woman, 2 eras, 2 distinct mothers. The adoptive lens didn't blur the biological one. It refracted a separate band of light. Blended families complicate the lens map even further. According to a 2017 Pew survey, 40% of American children will share a home with a step-sibling before age 18, meaning nearly half the dinner tables in the country host lenses ground on entirely different grinding wheels. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar notes that humans evolved to maintain about intimate ties. A sudden remarriage can double that load overnight, forcing kids to triage affection like air traffic controllers. In neural terms, the medial prefrontal cortex, your narrative self-hub, must stitch 2 family myths into one. Sometimes the seams show. Real story. When 12-year-old Kayla met her new stepbrother Malik in Atlanta, she hugged him out of politeness. Malik recoiled. In his previous house hugs meant manipulative apologies. Same gesture, opposite charge. Their mom, sensing tension, mandated story swaps. Once a week, each kid narrated a favorite childhood object. Kayla chose a trampoline, symbol of freedom. Malik picked the padlock he installed on his journal. 6 months later, Kayla convinced Malik to try the trampoline, and Malik taught Kayla basic encryption for her diary app. What began as collision became exchange, precisely because each lens was allowed airtime instead of being forced into uniform focus. Neurologically, that airtime matters. A Stanford fMRI study found that when step-siblings took turns describing memories while the other simply mirrored facial expressions, no verbal response, the speaker's amygdala activation fell by 22%. Mirroring tells the limbic system, your lens has a witness, lowering threat and opening the gate for oxytocin, the social bond hormone. It's compassionate neuroscience in motion. Cultural narratives lag behind the data. Fairy tales still paint stepfamilies as rival tribes. Think Cinderella or Hansel and Gretel. Yet modern longitudinal work by psychologist Monica McGoldrick shows that, a decade post-merge, 65% of blended siblings identify at least one life-defining strength gained solely from the other branch: skills, language, network. The initial lens clash once metabolized, becomes evolutionary advantage, like crossbreeding orchards for disease resistance. There's a caution, though. Unresolved lens friction in blended homes predicts adult romantic insecurity. A University of Oslo study tracked 300-step siblings into their 30s and found those who never processed early loyalty conflicts were twice as likely to fear abandonment in marriage. Translation: the lens you ignore today may fog tomorrow's partnerships. Practically 2 moves help. First, ritualize new narratives, family podcasts, joint photo collages, so each lens earns visible shelf space. Second, schedule tri-dialogues. Child A speaks, child B paraphrases, parent mediates only if meanings skew. Over time, paraphrase accuracy rises, proving lenses can calibrate with minimal adult lecturing. With blended dynamics mapped, we can now zoom to another arena where mismatched lenses quietly dictate success or attrition: the workplace. Mythology saw this pattern long before peer-reviewed journals. In the Mahabharata, 5 Pandava brothers each serve distinct cosmic purposes, yet share one mother. Yudhishthira embodies truth, Bhima strength, Arjuna focus, Nakula and Sahadeva wisdom and intuition. Ancient storytellers intuited that a single womb can incubate wildly different destinies, because circumstance, divine or mundane, tilts the cradle. Our science merely catches up, measuring cortisol where epics painted swords. Let's drive the lens deeper into neurogenome territory. Epigeneticist Moshe Sheaf's 2022 Montreal study biopsied identical twins in their 40s. Same genes, same city, same desk jobs. One twin became father at 21 during a recession, the other at 34 after a bull market. Methylation scans of the NR3C1 gene, the stress response gatekeeper, revealed activity gaps rivaling those of unrelated strangers. Parenthood lens, not genome, dictated how each twin's cells read the environment. Corporations experience analogous divergence. 2 sales reps enter the same company in the same hiring cohort. One starts under a quota-crushing manager who rewards hustle with Vegas retreats. The other under a mentor who values client relationships over numbers. 5 years on, HR wonders why identical resumes birthed dissonant performance curves. They forget to account for supervisory lens. Consulting firm Mercer now trains leaders in context indexing, mapping how fiscal quarter, team culture, and personal life events tint perception. Early results: attrition drops 18% when managers address lens mismatch instead of flogging attitude. Even justice, that cherished family dinner debate, who got grounded longer, who inherited grandma's piano, rests on lens illusion. Behavioral economist Dan Ariely ran the ultimatum game with siblings and found that younger brothers rejected unfair offers 27% more often than older sisters, even when rejecting cost them money. Why? The younger lens grows up negotiating from perceived scarcity. Equality feels overdue, not generous. Unless we surface that script, we misjudge moral wiring as stubbornness. Here's where the tension spikes. Lens clash can escalate to estrangement. Clinical psychologist Harriet Lerner notes that 40% of American adults are currently cut off from at least one family member. Dig beneath betrayal narratives, and you'll often find mismatched lenses hardened into ideologies. One sibling worships tradition, another champions reinvention. They're arguing values, but they're triggered by childhood weather reports that no longer match. Relief arrives through a practiced Buddhist teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, called deep listening. Neuroscientists at Yale translated his wisdom into fMRI. When person A listens without rebuttal for 90 seconds, mirror neuron firing in person B's motor cortex synchronizes, easing defensiveness. You can retune lenses not by logic, but by metabolizing another's story in silence. Let's witness the pivot in action. Real story. In 2020, amid pandemic claustrophobia, 2 Colombian half-brothers, Eduardo, a Bogota ICU nurse, and Mateo, a remote software engineer, erupted on Zoom over who should move in with their immunocompromised mother. Eduardo's lens, daily sirens, death counts. Mateo's lens, layoffs, code sprints. A therapist friend asked each to film a 60-second walkthrough of their daily routine. Watching the other's video, they cried. No speech exchanged, merely swapped lenses. They devised a rotation plan and later co-founded a mental health app for caregivers. Sometimes empathy downloads faster via video than vocabulary. A brief detour into cognitive trilateration. Developmental psychologist Eleanor Macoby says a child forms self-concept from triangulation among parent, sibling, and peer group. Remove or distort one point and the inner GPS overcorrects. That means repairing a sibling rupture can recalibrate your own identity coordinates, even if parents are gone and peers scattered. Now recall the leitmotif lens and tilt it toward memory reconsolidation. Studies at NYU show that when you recall an emotionally charged event and immediately insert fresh context, the memory rewrites at the chemical level, like editing a movie during screening. Next holiday, after your sister recounts the year Dad missed her recital, gently add, "Dad had just lost his job that month. I only recently learned." You're not erasing her hurt, you're adjusting focal length so both experiences fit one frame. Some ask, does exploring all these lenses excuse hurtful behavior? No, accountability remains. But it transforms vengeance into curiosity, which neurologist Richard Davidson found correlates with increased left prefrontal activation, an area tied to resilience. When you grow curious, you neurologically grow sturdier. If we zoom out, social harmony could sharpen by adopting lens literacy as early education. Imagine middle school workshops where siblings craft family timelines, marking parental job changes and house moves. Teachers highlight how context shapes memory. Kids learn early that disagreement on childhood facts doesn't signal dishonesty, it signals vantage point. Adults who absorb that lesson grow into partners who argue with curiosity, not contempt. You've crossed 2,000 words. Lens after lens has stacked. Let's consolidate. Step 1. Accept plurality. Your memory doesn't nullify your brother's. Step 2. Audit old labels. Rewrite their adult utility. Step 3. Practice lens swapping before high-voltage family events. Calm physiology will follow psychology. Step 4. Share the science. When you lean on Gallup stats or default mode networks, you disarm the myth that family conflict is pure personality clash. Your call to action is simple and private. Tonight, jot one family scene you've replayed for years. Next to it, write how a sibling might have experienced that same moment. Spend 10 silent breaths picturing their lens without judging. That's all, 10 breaths. Neuroscience says the exercise can widen empathy circuits. Watts would say it tunes you to the underlying music rather than the clashing lyrics. No two siblings share the same parents because parents, like rivers, never stay still. And children, like lenses, bend light uniquely. But once you know this, you can step out from under the weight of comparison and into the spaciousness of shared yet singular origin. The dinner table becomes less a courtroom and more a gallery of legitimate perspectives, each frame angled differently, all reflecting shards of the same ever-changing sky.